Eastern State Penitentiary, Philadelphia, USA. The haunting history. Eastern State Penitentiary was designed with a cruel twist: absolute solitude. The prison's founders believed that isolation would lead to true repentance, so inmates were kept in tiny, stone cells with just a single, narrow skylight. They were forbidden from speaking, and guards used cloth around their shoes to silence their steps. This intense isolation led many inmates to the brink of insanity, and tales of screams echoing through the halls became commonplace. When the prison closed in 1971, it was said that many of its tortured souls refused to leave. Ghostly encounters. The prison is now open for tours, but visitors have frequently reported feeling intense unease as they walk through the empty cells and decaying corridors. Paranormal investigators claim that cell block 12 is particularly haunted, where voices can be heard crying and shrieking even though the cells are empty. One famous ghost story centers around a former guard who allegedly still patrols the halls. Visitors report seeing his shadowy form pacing back and forth, seemingly keeping watch over the desolate cell blocks. Then there's the case of Slick Eddie, a mobster who supposedly went mad and died in his cell. People say they hear whispers around his cell, as if Eddie is still confessing his misdeeds in his haunted solitude. Alcatraz Federal Penitentiary, San Francisco, USA. The haunting history. Alcatraz, the infamous prison set on a lonely island in San Francisco Bay, once held some of the most dangerous criminals in America, including Al Capone and Robert Stroud, the Birdman of Alcatraz. Known for its nearly impossible escape, Alcatraz was the site of numerous escape attempts, riots, and violent fights, and many prisoners met brutal fates within its concrete walls. Stories of paranormal activity began shortly after the prison closed in 1963, and visitors and staff alike reported strange sights and sounds. Ghostly encounters. One of Alcatraz's most haunted spots is Cell 14D, a place reserved for the most unruly prisoners. Known as the Hole, this pitch-dark, damp cell was a form of punishment on top of punishment. One inmate, who had been screaming for hours that a creature with glowing eyes was watching him, was found dead in the cell by morning, his body twisted in horror. Today, visitors who step inside Cell 14D report an overwhelming feeling of dread, and some claim to have felt icy fingers brush against their skin. In the showers, people say they can hear the faint strumming of a banjo, a sound that supposedly belonged to Al Capone, who played the instrument during his incarceration. Old Changi Hospital and Prison, Changi, Singapore. The haunting history. Originally built as a hospital in 1935, Old Changi was transformed into a prison during World War II by Japanese forces, who used it to detain and torture Allied prisoners of war. It's estimated that hundreds of men perished within these walls, subjected to brutal interrogation techniques. After the war, it was converted back into a hospital but eventually abandoned in 1997. Over time, tales of ghostly apparitions, disembodied footsteps, and eerie whispers began to circulate. Ghostly encounters. Visitors report seeing ghostly soldiers wandering the hallways and feeling sudden drops in temperature. The most notorious spirit is that of a Japanese officer who is said to wander the empty halls, staring visitors down with cold eyes. The officer's ghost has reportedly appeared in photographs taken on the premises, looming ominously in the background. A nurse in old-fashioned attire has also been seen wandering the grounds. Witnesses say she approaches as if to offer comfort before vanishing without a trace. Locals also talk about the spirit of a young boy who seems lost, seen peering out from the upper floors with empty eyes and a sorrowful expression. Port Arthur Penal Settlement, Tasmania, Australia. The haunting history. Once one of the British Empire's harshest convict sites, Port Arthur housed the most hardened criminals transported from Britain to Australia. The prison used a separate system to break prisoners' spirits through relentless isolation and deprivation. The dark energies accumulated here over its years of operation, and it's said that not all prisoners have found rest. Ghost tours frequently traverse the ruins, but tour guides warn of the deeply unsettling atmosphere that seems to consume the site after sunset. Ghostly encounters. Several ghostly figures have been reported by visitors and staff alike, including a young girl with hollow, mournful eyes who is sometimes seen near the barracks. Her soft, faint crying is said to drift through the night air. Another notorious spirit is the Lady in Blue, thought to be the wife of a soldier stationed at Port Arthur who died during childbirth. Her apparition, dressed in flowing blue, is often seen pacing near the infirmary, her hands clasped as if in prayer. Visitors have described feeling as though they're being watched, and some even report the sensation of unseen hands pressing down on their shoulders as they walk through the ruins. The Tower of London, London, England. The haunting history. The Tower of London has been a place of imprisonment, torture, and execution for centuries. Originally built in 1078 by William the Conqueror, the tower has seen some of the darkest chapters in British history. From Anne Boleyn to the princes in the tower, many of its prisoners met untimely and often brutal deaths. Over the centuries, the tower has become one of the most haunted locations in the UK. Ghostly encounters. Perhaps the most famous ghost at the tower is that of Anne Boleyn, the ill-fated queen who was executed on the orders of her husband, King Henry VIII. Her headless spectre is said to roam the tower grounds, particularly around the chapel of St. Peter ad Vincula, where she was laid to rest. Other visitors have reported seeing the two young princes, who vanished from the tower in 1483, playing together in one of the rooms only to fade away upon closer inspection. The tower's most unsettling entity, however, is the White Lady, a figure in a flowing white gown. Those who encounter her report feeling an overpowering sense of sorrow, and many say they can smell the faint scent of roses when she's near. Ararat Lunatic Asylum, J Ward, Victoria, Australia. The haunting history. Originally built as a prison in the 1850s before being converted into an asylum for the criminally insane, J Ward was home to some of Australia's most deranged criminals. The building's history is filled with accounts of death, punishment, and mental anguish, and it's said that many of the souls confined here never left. Tours of J Ward are not for the faint-hearted. Visitors are warned about the disturbing paranormal activity that reportedly occurs within its walls. Ghostly encounters. One of the most frequently reported sightings is of a former prisoner named Old Bill, who died in his cell after years of confinement. His ghostly presence is felt in the form of sudden chills and soft murmurs in the dead of night. Another chilling entity is the Man in Black, a shadowy figure who appears without warning in the asylum's hallways, often accompanied by an overpowering sense of dread. The ghost of a nurse, who allegedly took her own life after witnessing the horrors within J Ward, is sometimes seen in the operating theater, her presence felt as a cold breeze and a faint whisper saying, "I'm sorry." Prison Island, Zanzibar, Tanzania. The haunted courtyards, the souls of the suffering slaves. Prison Island, located off the coast of Zanzibar, was originally used as a quarantine station for individuals suffering from diseases like yellow fever and cholera. It later became a prison where slaves were detained, and it is the haunting memories of these forgotten souls that seem to linger the most. Although the prison is now a tourist attraction, many visitors have reported strange encounters with ghostly apparitions in the old courtyards. The most commonly reported experiences on Prison Island involve sightings of figures in old prison uniforms, often seen near the ruined walls of the prison or standing silently near the water's edge. The island's history as a place of suffering for both the sick and the enslaved seems to have left its mark, with many visitors describing an overwhelming sense of sadness or oppression. Moundsville Penitentiary, Moundsville, West Virginia, USA. The haunting of Old Sparky and other restless souls. Moundsville Penitentiary, which operated from 1876 to 1995, is a sprawling and imposing institution located in the small town of Moundsville, West Virginia. The prison gained a notorious reputation for its violent conditions and overcrowded cells. The stories of its haunted past are as grim as the prison's history. During its time in operation, Moundsville housed some of the most dangerous criminals in the country, many of whom died inside its walls, either through execution, murder, or the harsh conditions of prison life. One of the most famous legends associated with Moundsville is the ghost of a prisoner who was executed in the electric chair, nicknamed Old Sparky. Witnesses claim to have seen the shadowy figure of a man with a hood over his head, walking near the execution chamber. The smell of burning flesh has also been reported to linger in the air, even though the chair hasn't been used for decades. The electric chair has become a chilling symbol of the prison's grim history, with visitors often describing a strange, oppressive feeling when standing near it. In addition to Old Sparky, paranormal investigators have captured evidence of other spirits, including the cries and whispers of former inmates who were brutally beaten or killed. Many have reported hearing disembodied footsteps echoing through the empty halls, and some visitors have even claimed to see shadowy figures lurking in the prison's dark corners. The former isolation cells and the prison's old kitchen, where many tragic and violent events took place, are hot spots for paranormal activity. People claim to feel an intense, unshakable dread, as though they're being watched by unseen forces. Kilmainham Jail, Dublin, Ireland. The spirits of Ireland's rebellious past. Kilmainham Jail, built in 1796, holds an important place in Irish history. Over the centuries, it has housed thousands of prisoners, many of whom were political activists and revolutionaries. Perhaps the most notable among them were the leaders of the 1916 Easter Rising, who were executed after the failed rebellion against British rule. Today, Kilmainham Jail is a museum and one of Ireland's most visited historical sites, but its turbulent past has left it steeped in paranormal activity. One of the most well-known spirits said to haunt the prison is that of an unnamed woman who is believed to have died there in childbirth. Her ghost is often seen wandering the cells, dressed in period clothing, weeping softly. Many visitors and staff have reported hearing the sound of soft crying, especially in the old women's section of the prison. The cries are said to echo down the dark corridors, growing louder as one approaches the area where the woman is thought to have died. In addition to the ghostly woman, Kilmainham Jail is also haunted by the spirits of political prisoners who were executed by firing squad. Their souls are said to still roam the prison grounds, searching for justice. One of the most notable ghost sightings occurred in 2002 when a group of visitors saw a shadowy figure standing near the execution chamber. The figure appeared to be a soldier from the time of the Rising, but when they approached, the apparition vanished into thin air. The general atmosphere inside Kilmainham Jail is often described as heavy, as if the weight of history is palpable. Many visitors report a sudden, overwhelming sadness when exploring certain parts of the prison, particularly the execution yard and the solitary confinement cells. Some have even claimed to feel cold spots, or to catch glimpses of ghostly faces peering out from behind the bars. The Old Melbourne Jail, Melbourne, Australia. The ghost of Ned Kelly and other spirits. The Old Melbourne Jail, a notorious prison that operated from 1842 to 1929, is one of Australia's most haunted locations. It is most famous for being the place where the infamous outlaw Ned Kelly was hanged in 1880. Kelly was the leader of a gang of bush rangers who terrorized the Australian outback and became a legendary figure in Australian history. His death at the gallows marked a bloody and tragic end to his life, and some believe his spirit never left. The ghost of Ned Kelly is said to haunt the area where he was executed. Witnesses report hearing the clinking of chains and the faint sound of boots walking the halls, as though he's still pacing the prison, waiting for justice. Some even claim to have seen a figure wearing a metal helmet, resembling the one Kelly wore during his final moments, walking the prison yard late at night. Other restless spirits of the Old Melbourne Jail include former prisoners who were executed in the jail's infamous execution chamber. The jail was the site of 133 hangings during its operation, and many believe the spirits of these men and women remain trapped within the prison walls. People who visit the site often report feelings of unease, and some claim to have seen figures peering out from the barred windows or heard faint whispers in the shadows. The jail is particularly active during its nighttime tours, when ghost hunters and paranormal enthusiasts gather to investigate. Portsmouth Jail, Portsmouth, New Hampshire, USA. The Wailing Woman and Phantom Guards. The old Portsmouth Jail, located in New Hampshire, has been closed for over a century, but its haunted reputation still lingers. The prison, which operated from 1790 until its closure in 1908, housed hundreds of criminals, many of whom died while incarcerated. It was also used during the Civil War to hold Confederate prisoners of war, which added a layer of tension and tragedy to its history. The most well-known ghost story at Portsmouth Jail is the tale of the Wailing Woman, whose ghost is said to appear near the prison's old execution chamber. Legend has it that the woman was a prisoner who was wrongfully executed, and her spirit has been heard crying out in sorrow ever since. Visitors have reported hearing distant wails, often followed by a sense of oppressive coldness that seems to settle around them. Some even claim to have seen her ghostly figure roaming the prison's old corridors. In addition to the Wailing Woman, there have been reports of encounters with ghostly guards who are believed to still patrol the prison grounds. Some visitors have heard the sound of boots marching on the stone floors, or seen shadows moving swiftly through the hallways. One of the eeriest experiences reported by visitors occurred when a group of ghost hunters attempted to communicate with the spirits through a spirit box, only to have their questions answered by what appeared to be the voice of an old prison guard. The Beechworth Lunatic Asylum, Beechworth, Victoria, Australia. The screams of the insane. While technically not a prison, the Beechworth Lunatic Asylum operated as a facility for the criminally insane, and it shares a similar dark and haunted legacy. Built in the 1860s, the asylum housed thousands of patients, many of whom were subjected to cruel treatments, including electroshock therapy, lobotomies, and harsh physical restraints. The stories of these tortured souls continue to haunt the asylum's dark, oppressive halls. The most famous ghostly figure at Beechworth is that of a nurse who allegedly went mad herself after witnessing the torment and abuse of the patients. Her spirit is said to wander the halls, and her chilling presence has been reported by multiple visitors. Her footsteps can be heard echoing through the empty corridors, and the flicker of lights often accompanies her ghostly figure. In addition to the nurse, many visitors have reported hearing the anguished screams and wails of former patients. Some claim to have encountered shadowy figures, the spirits of patients who died in the asylum, or felt sudden cold drafts sweeping through the halls. The most unsettling experience occurred when a ghost hunter was reportedly touched by an unseen force, only to later find strange handprints on their clothing. The Castle of Good Hope, Cape Town, South Africa. The ghost of the Lady in Grey. The Castle of Good Hope in Cape Town, South Africa, is one of the oldest surviving colonial buildings in the country. Built between 1666 and 1679 by the Dutch East India Company, it has served many purposes over the years, including as a military stronghold, a prison, and a site for executions. The castle's long and bloody history has made it the site of numerous paranormal occurrences, and it is widely regarded as one of South Africa's most haunted locations. One of the most famous ghosts that haunts the Castle of Good Hope is that of a woman dressed in gray. Known as the Lady in Grey, she is believed to be the spirit of a former resident of the castle, possibly a lady who was tragically murdered or committed suicide. Her ghost has been seen walking along the castle's ramparts or standing silently at the windows, gazing out toward the sea. Those who have seen her describe her as an ethereal figure, dressed in period clothing, with a forlorn expression on her face. Sometimes, her apparition is accompanied by a feeling of intense cold, as though she is waiting for something or someone. In addition to the Lady in Grey, visitors have reported hearing disembodied voices, as well as the sound of footsteps echoing through the castle's labyrinthine corridors. Some have even seen shadowy figures darting between the castle's ancient walls or felt an unseen presence following them as they explore the grounds. The eerie silence of the castle, combined with its centuries-old history of death, imprisonment, and military conflict, adds to the feeling that something, or someone, is still watching. The Trans-Allegheny Lunatic Asylum, Weston, West Virginia, USA. Ghostly echoes, the restless souls of the insane. The Trans-Allegheny Lunatic Asylum, also known as the Weston State Hospital, is one of the most infamous sites in West Virginia. Built in the mid-1800s, this facility housed thousands of patients over its long history, many of whom were subjected to inhumane treatments such as electroshock therapy, lobotomies, and even restraint in cramped, filthy cells. The conditions were deplorable, and patients often endured neglect, mistreatment, and cruelty at the hands of the staff. The asylum closed its doors in 1994, but it is said that the spirits of the patients never left. Ghost stories from Trans-Allegheny are numerous, with reports of shadowy figures roaming the hallways, mysterious voices, and strange noises echoing through the decaying building. The most chilling hauntings are said to occur in the cage room, where patients were once locked in small cages and left to rot. Visitors and ghost hunters have claimed to hear the soft sound of shuffling footsteps or whispers of those who perished there, some even reporting sudden feelings of dizziness or nausea as though the spirits of the mentally ill are still reaching out to make contact. One of the most famous ghostly legends involves the spirit of a young girl, said to have died in the asylum under mysterious circumstances. Her apparition has been seen wandering the halls, and her laughter can often be heard echoing through the empty spaces. Some claim that her ghost is seeking solace, a release from the suffering she endured during her time at the asylum. Other spirits reported at the site include former staff members, some of whom are said to still watch over the asylum even after death, possibly taking the form of shadowy figures or mysterious, cold spots. The asylum's vast and eerie expanse, with its dark hallways, neglected rooms, and boarded-up windows, gives the feeling that something, someone, still lingers there, awaiting a final release. The Infirmary of St. Elizabeth's Hospital, Washington, D.C., USA. Phantom whispers and the ghosts of the mentally ill. St. Elizabeth's Hospital, established in 1855, was the first federally run psychiatric hospital in the United States. Over the years, it housed thousands of mentally ill patients, many of whom were abandoned by family and society. With its history of institutional abuse and neglect, it's no surprise that the hospital has developed a reputation as one of the most haunted places in Washington, D.C. The most well-known haunting at St. Elizabeth's Hospital is tied to the old infirmary, which housed some of the most seriously disturbed and violent patients. It was here that many patients underwent terrifying procedures like lobotomies, electroshock treatments, and even cruel isolation. Visitors and paranormal investigators have reported hearing unexplained voices and the soft sounds of crying coming from the empty rooms, often accompanied by sudden drops in temperature. Another commonly reported experience is the sensation of being watched, particularly in the old psychiatric wards. Some visitors claim to feel a presence behind them as they walk through the halls, or even to see shadowy figures standing in doorways, watching them from afar. The feeling of being followed is particularly strong in the corridors near the old padded rooms, where many patients were confined for extended periods. People who visit the hospital often describe an overwhelming sense of sadness and despair, as though the spirits of the mentally ill are still trapped within the walls. One particularly eerie account comes from a ghost tour guide who reported seeing a shadowy figure standing in a doorway, staring directly at them. When they turned to look again, the figure had vanished, leaving nothing but the oppressive silence of the abandoned facility.